So I wanted to talk today a little bit about Satsvarupa Das Goswami, who was a big leader in ISKCON for quite some time, and he had a lot of influence, especially after 1978, because he was their main position paper writer. He was writing documents, he was writing the GBC reports, he was writing position papers, and he was speaking and lecturing and giving the philosophy that Srila Prabhupada had appointed 11 guru successors, and he was one of those successors. But let's review what Satsvarupa wrote just recently. He writes, Satsvarupa Das Goswami says, digression. In writing about what people know of me, I thought to remark that for 20 years in Krishna consciousness, from about 1966 to 1987, I resented that I was taken advantage of by people who knew they could manipulate me. I had to represent the GBC by writing position papers, I had to go on assignments to investigate apostates, and I had to get involved in politics, and in so doing, I compromised my integrity. Okay, let's go back and review a little bit of what he just said here. He was being taken advantage of from 1966 through 1987. Okay, well, in 1966, he was one of the early devotees. Therefore, he must have known the qualification of the other people who were joining. He must have known Kirtanananda, Hansaduta, Gargamuni, Brahmananda, all these different people who were coming. He must have known they had all kinds of problems. And they did have problems. So how did he not know that these people would not be able to remove all these problems in 10 years? From 1966 to, let's say, 1977, how would they erase and eliminate all the problems that they came with? They came with all this baggage. How would they remove all that baggage in 10 years? It doesn't seem feasible. So in 1966, he joins, he knows these people have all these problems, and yet 10 years later, he says they're pure devotees and they're as good as God. How is that possible? Especially since Prabhupada had one problem after the next with these GBC leaders all the time, very famous. Prabhupada was disagreeing and arguing and having problems with these leaders the whole time. So why did Satsvarupa think in 10 years they all of a sudden became as good as God, when even up until Prabhupada's final last days on the planet, he was still having problems and troubles with these leaders? So it doesn't make any sense that they had catapulted from eating hamburgers and having abortions and taking drugs and committing crimes and all the things that were going on with these people before they became devotees, that they would eliminate all that in 10 short years. It didn't make any sense. It wasn't feasible. And it wasn't feasible to a lot of us either. We said, wait a minute, how did these guys become as pure as God in 10 years when we also joined early on, and we didn't get rid of all of our problems? We still have problems, but they don't. Does that make any sense? So it doesn't make any sense that all of a sudden, within 10 years after joining a religion, that a person would become as good as Jesus, as good as God, and a pure devotee. That really never happens in any religion, and Prabhupada never said that would happen in his religion. It was just basically made up. Satsvarupa just made it up. Yes, 11 of us have become pure, but none of the rest of you have become pure. Well, why did only 11 of you become pure? 11 are pure, the rest of you are not pure. Why is that? So that's another defect with his idea. If Prabhupada's disciples could become pure in 10 years, then all of them would have been pure in 10 years, not just 11. Now, Satsvarupa claims that he is a pure devotee because he was appointed to be a pure devotee. Well, if it's that simple, you just appoint someone to be a pure devotee, then why didn't Prabhupada appoint all 5,000 disciples to be pure devotees? It's very simple. You are hereby appointed to be a pure devotee, therefore you are a pure devotee. Well, then appoint everyone at the same time. So again, this doesn't make sense either. If Prabhupada had thought, all I have to do is appoint these people to be pure devotees, he would have appointed all of the disciples. So that's, of course, not what happened. But what happened instead is the other 5,000 devotees then became the competitors and the enemies of the gurus. So the devotees of Prabhupada were just getting kicked out of ISKCON left, right, and center. They were being driven out on a rail. They were offenders, they weren't cooperating, they didn't realize that Satsvarupa is a pure devotee, they weren't cooperating with the whole idea that 11 people had been appointed. They have to leave. And so thousands and thousands of devotees were purged out of ISKCON. And of course Satsvarupa knew this was going on. So I'm not sure how he can say he's now a victim of this whole process when he was one of the orchestrators and manipulators of this whole situation. Now, according to Hansaduda, of course Hansaduda, not sure how reliable he is, but let's assume Hansaduda is correct. He said that in the meeting of the 11, the original meetings, Satsvarupa was one of the ringleaders and organizers, and he was telling everybody, wait, you can't just go fly off to your zones. You have to have the same argument as I have. We all have to have the same consistent argument. So he went through the arguments that they were going to use against the Prabhupada devotees. Satsvarupa organized that. And that does make a lot of sense because he was certainly more calm and collected and cool-headed than the rest. Hansaduda said Ramachar just wanted to fly off and start initiating people. Kirtananda wanted to fly off. Bhagavan wanted to fly off. Well, that makes a lot of sense. They were very passionate kind of guys. But Satsvarupa, he said, whoa, no, we can't do that. We have to make sure our arguments are all consistent or this thing will fall apart. So, at least according to Hansaduda, Satsvarupa was a ringleader, but he certainly became the main writer for them. So he was the person putting together the arguments. He was writing the argument. And he also wrote that infamous paper, The Mahajans Have Difficulties, where the GBC established that the Mahajans have problems. Our gurus are having problems, but that's no big deal because the Mahajans also had problems. Arjuna lost sight of Krishna, this type of thing. So they were arguing that it is common for pure devotees to fall into illusion. So this was one of the arguments presented by Satsvarupa. Now, Prabhupada had already said gurus are not appointed because in the Gaudiya Math they tried to appoint a guru and it was just a disaster. We shouldn't be doing that in ISKCON. And Satsvarupa was very aware that Prabhupada had made this argument. We cannot have appointed gurus. It doesn't work. It won't work. It didn't work in 1936. It won't work now. You can't take a conditioned devotee and make him into an acharya. It doesn't work. Now in 1936, they had very much more elevated people than we had. They were vegetarians for their whole life, many of them. They were Brahminical scholars, and they were more elevated than us. So if they could not overcome their past, and they couldn't catapult themselves to become pure devotees, how would our much less qualified people become pure devotees all of a sudden? That also did not make sense. Now Satsvarupa further admits that he was deputed to investigate apostates. Okay, who are the apostates? The apostates are the disciples of Prabhupada who do not accept that these 11 are gurus or pure devotees or Krishna's representatives or whatever they were calling themselves. So the apostates were enemies and had to be taken out of ISKCON and maybe even taken out of their bodies, which did happen. Some of the apostates were murdered. Now Sulochan was one of the famous apostates and he saw how Satsvarupa was writing against him. Satsvarupa wrote that I'm being attacked by a poison pen, and of course the poison pen was Sulochan and me, to some extent. So we became targets for assassination because we are poison. We're poison pens. Go get the poison. Go kill the poison. Go remove the poison. And so we were considered targets for assassination because Satsvarupa was on assignment to investigate apostates and write against apostates. So he was saying Kirtananda is a pure devotee, and we are offending a pure devotee, Kirtananda. Meanwhile, Kirtananda was having oral sex with young men in his motorhome. That's what we were complaining about. He's not a pure devotee. He's having oral sex. A bunch of his people are having all kinds of different sex going on. And there was illicit sex happening left, right, and center in New Vrindavan. So we were complaining about that, including that the guru was engaged in illicit sex. So we couldn't do that because then we became apostates. Then we became targets. Then we should be murdered, which did happen. So Sulochan said, Satsvarupa has painted a bullseye on my back, and I will be killed. So he knew who was inciting the opposition to him. Sulochan knew that. And that is why Satsvarupa is now trying to paint himself as a victim. Well, the other guys made me do this. The other guys made me hunt down the apostates. The other guys made me support this whole illusory idea that 11 of us are as pure as God. The other guys are responsible. I was just a victim. I wasn't really interested in doing this. And Hansaduta told me the same thing. Oh, they made me become a guru. I didn't want to become a guru, but they told me you have to become a guru. So they're all victims. All these guys are victims. But we know they're not victims. They're the main orchestrating team, the cabal, the group, and the orchestrators of this whole situation. That we are the appointed 11 successors. Anybody who doesn't accept it is an apostate, will be hunted down, will be kicked out, will be banned, will be removed, will be beat up, will be killed. So that is the system he set up. So now he's just trying to shift the blame. Well, somebody else made me do this. I really didn't want to do this. Well, good luck with that. All criminals say the same thing. Well, I didn't really want to rob the bank. The other guys got me into it, and they told me I have to do this. So, yeah, but who authorized any of you to rob the bank? One time at the Berkeley Temple, I met a person who claims he was Satsvarupa's secretary, and he said Satsvarupa was having all kinds of migraine headaches all the time, and he wanted to find a cure for his headaches. So one of the places he went was to visit a psychic, a famous psychic in Seattle, I think. And Satsvarupa didn't want the psychic to know he was a devotee, so he dressed in regular clothes, and he goes in to see the psychic, and the psychic immediately says, "Oh my God, sir, you are covered with a big black ball of dark energy. You need to just get a Yellow Pages phone book, look up churches. You got to start going to church. You need to really find your way with God right away." So this guy thought it was very funny that the psychic advised Satsvarupa to go to church and try to find God. So evidently he hadn't found God yet. And the secretary also said that Satsvarupa was taking a lot of psychotropic medications, all kinds of tranquilizers and things like that to cure his headaches. So this is very typical of cult leaders like Jim Jones and people like that. They take a lot of different pills and medications, and basically they make themselves kind of go crazy with all these medications. And Hansaduta was doing the same thing. He was taking all kinds of psychotropic drugs. So this is unfortunately what happens in cults. The cult leader gets more and more out of control. He has all kinds of grief and misery because he's cheating people, and it's a very difficult situation to continue cheating people. So they get headaches, they have all these problems, so then they take drugs to try to overcome their suffering. But of course the suffering is coming from Krishna. Krishna's trying to remind them, hey, you can't be doing this. You can't be cheating people. That's not good. That's why you have a headache. But it never occurred to Satsvarupa, oh, maybe I have this headache because I'm cheating people, Maybe I have this headache because Krishna is punishing me for cheating people. It just doesn't occur to these people. It's very strange. You have a headache. Why do you have a headache? Satsvarupa's friend, Hansaduta, did eventually tell me that the reason he had headaches was from all the cheating. Krishna did not approve of the cheating, and therefore Hansaduta had the same headaches. Hansaduta was suffering with the same symptoms as Satsvarupa, except Hansaduta at least made some effort to try to rectify and admit that he was not a guru and all that kind of stuff. And he made some, let's say, partial rectification. Now, Satsvarupa complains that he was forced to write a document against Sridhar Maharaj in 1982, but he forgets to mention that the whole reason that everybody had been going to Sridhar was because Satsvarupa told everybody to go to Sridhar. So Satsvarupa gets everybody involved with the Sridhar Maharaj program, and then all of a sudden he decides it's not a good program, and so he has to write a paper telling everybody not to go to Sridhar. Now the reason they had to get rid of Sridhar was that he, at that time, was still under the illusion that these people were gurus. And so he kept saying, yeah, but Jayatirtha is a guru. You can't get rid of the guru. Jayatirtha is the Acharya. This will destroy ISKCON if you get rid of the Acharya. And Hansaduta is also an Acharya. You can't get rid of the Acharya. So Satsvarupa set up the whole system that everybody has to surrender to Sridhar, work with Sridhar, follow Sridhar. Then all of a sudden Satsvarupa decides, oh no, Sridhar is a bad guy. No one should go to Sridhar. So Satsvarupa just whipsawing people back and forth here. You sent everybody to Sridhar, then you said nobody is allowed to go to Sridhar. So this created a big spin-off organization. Jayatirtha left ISKCON and took allegedly 1,700 people with him from his different zone areas. And then his zone went bankrupt. And they had to give up Krum Court. They just bought this building, and they had to give the building back. They couldn't pay for it because Jayatirtha had devastated the zone. Everybody left. So what was the result of promoting Sridhar and then getting rid of Sridhar? Well, you just created a big bunch of spin-offs. And then Jagat Guru went to Sridhar, and then Sudhir went to Sridhar, and Panchadevita went to Sridhar. And this guy and that guy and the other guy went to Sridhar and started a whole separate competition with ISKCON, which was no longer even part of ISKCON. Then, after all that, Satsvarupa decides, let's make another guy our Shiksha Guru. So Satsvarupa declared that Narayan Maharaj is now the Shiksha Guru of ISKCON. Same thing happened. He propped up Narayan Maharaj, made Narayan Maharaj into a big authority for ISKCON. Narayan Maharaj was helping Satsvarupa write the Guru Reform Notebook. The Guru Reform took off in 1986, where they voted in many more gurus. Of course, they also excommunicated Sulochan, and that was the death knell for Sulochan. Sulochan was murdered just a few months after that. So the whole Guru Reform thing was Satsvarupa's idea. He was writing all his papers about Guru and Reform. So he created all these problems. He created the Sridhar problem, created the Narayan problem, created the Guru Reform problem. And meanwhile, there's all kinds of child molesting going on, left, right, and center, all around ISKCON. Because Satsvarupa's program is orchestrating molesting on a large scale all over the society. So there was molesting in Los Angeles, molesting in New Vrindavan, molesting in Vrindavan, molesting in Mayapur. And according to an ex-teacher of Satsvarupa, all of the kids in Satsvarupa school were molested. So he is in charge. He's supposed to be looking out for these children. And what is he doing? Well, according to one ex-disciple of Satsvarupa, he was living in Howard Johnson hotels, ordering out pizzas and watching football on TV. In fact, Satsvarupa even writes that at one time. He wrote that he was watching football. So he's staying in Howard Johnson's motel, he's ordering out pizza, he's watching football. Meanwhile, devotees are being banned, beaten, molested, sued, and assassinated. And he's just wondering, when is my pizza coming? So what kind of management is that? Now Satsvarupa says he resigned. He resigned? What good is that? He resigned, Rameshwar resigned, Bhagavan resigned, Jayatirath resigned. So you start a big mess and then you just resign and walk away. You start the house on fire and while the people are burning up in the house, you resign and walk away. It's not my problem anymore. Well, whose problem is it exactly? You started this fire. You created these problems. And then you just walk away and resign like nothing is wrong? No, you are responsible. You created this mess. You are responsible for all the suffering that all these people are enduring, and then you just walk away like there's no problem. There is a big problem here. People are being banned. People are being beaten. People are being molested. People are being assassinated, and bogus lawsuits are happening. For example, the $20 million lawsuit in India where Satsvarupa's people sued the Prabhupada devotees to try to get them kicked out of the temple. So who's going to pay this $20 million? Is Satsvarupa going to pay? No. Now, some of the Jai Vitaka followers wrote me a really nasty letter saying, because of you helping the Bangalore lawsuit and the child molesting lawsuit and the BBTI lawsuit, we, ISKCON, have lost $100 million, and it's all your fault. Whoa, wait a minute. I didn't ask you guys to make all these lawsuits. I told you, don't allow the molesting or you'll have a lawsuit. Don't sue the people who are worshiping Prabhupada. It's not going to end well. And don't change the book, so we have to make a lawsuit for the BBT rights. You guys wanted all these lawsuits. It has nothing to do with me. But anyway, assuming they're correct, let's assume that they spent $100 million on lawsuits. Is Satsvarupa going to pay the $100 million? These lawsuits happened because of his program. His program generated this expense for ISKCON. And simultaneously, many of the big donors of ISKCON quit donating, seeing that, ISKCON was going into the crapper, really. So they lost hundreds of millions easily in lost donations. So they're losing donations, they're spending. Jayatira's zone goes bankrupt, Bhagavan's zone goes bankrupt, Harikesha's zone goes pretty much bankrupt, Germany goes bankrupt, Austria goes bankrupt. And does Satsvarupa have any plan whatever to pay back ISKCON for all this money that it lost? No, he doesn't. No problem. In his future life, he'll be taking birth on planets where he'll be working in Yamaraj's coal mines and he'll have to pay it all back. You can't just steal hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars from Krishna and bankrupt his mission and not have to pay it back. You do have to pay it back at some point. Really. So anyway, Satsvarupa, he started this whole thing. Oh, he helped start this whole thing. So he was one of the robbers in the bank. Now he's saying, oh, I wasn't really trying to rob the bank. The other guys were doing that. I just, they made me come. How did they make you come? Are you kidding me? No, you voluntarily came. You voluntarily wrote endless amounts of papers for them. You were writing your own journals and poems and all kinds of crap for years and years and years on end. And you made your own bed. Now you have to lay in it. You can't just blame the other guys now. They did not force you to do all this stuff. You did this yourself. You forced this upon ISKCON. You forced this whole deviation upon ISKCON. You wanted ISKCON to worship deviants as acharyas. And you were one of the deviants yourself. Then it turns out Satsvarupa is having an affair with his secretary or therapist or whatever she is. I don't know. So he's having an affair. He's still a guru. I mean, how is all this going on? Then he writes this really crazy book, Sanatorium, about a man having sex with his therapist, which is really an autobiography of himself. And then this woman goes through all kinds of suffering because she exposes the whole thing, and then she gets blamed for being the bad guy because she exposed this whole thing. She's causing trouble. She's a troublemaker. So, I mean, Satsvarupa is just causing mayhem and trouble for all kinds of people. Now, Satsvarupa told one woman to become his disciple and follow him, and the husband didn't want to follow Satsvarupa. Satsvarupa says, don't worry, I will personally make sure your kids are not molested. I will take care of your kids. The husband obviously knew there was a molesting problem. Well, Satsvarupa says, no problem, I'll take care of these kids. Well, the kids got molested. The kids got molested anyway, so Satsvarupa doesn't take care of nothing except Satsvarupa. He still has his own Vyasa pujas. He makes all these crazy whacked out paintings that look like satanic little satans that he's painting. And he still thinks he's some kind of wonderful guy that everybody should consult with. And he still, has people visiting him, consulting and stuff like that. Because he thinks he's an important person who's done important service. Your service was to make deviants into acharyas. Your service was to bankrupt ISKCON. Your service was to have us targeted for assassination. How is that your service? How are you serving Krishna by doing all these things? I don't get it. And the list of problems is really endless. If we think about how the cows had to suffer. The cows were freezing and slipping on frozen water because Satsvarupa kicked out the people taking care of the cows. And so the cows had to suffer. Everybody has to suffer so that Satsvarupa can sit in a hotel and watch TV and eat pizzas. That's the real end result here. Everybody else has to suffer. We have to get banned. We have to get beaten. We have to get sued. We have to get assassinated. The cows have to fall on the ice. And some woman has to get into trouble for exposing the affair that Satsvarupa's having. Children have to get molested. ISKCON has to go bankrupt. And it's just all for one purpose. So Satsvarupa can sit in Howard Johnson and eat pizzas. That's what the whole thing was all about. Really. So is he going down the crapper of Krishna's karma world? I would say, yeah, major, big time. You can't do this to Krishna and Krishna's movement and Krishna's devotees. You can't have Krishna's devotees banned and beaten and molested and assassinated. You can't do that to Krishna's devotees, whether they're pure devotees or not so pure devotees. You can't do that to any devotees. You can't even do that to normal, ordinary people. You have to go to hell if you just do that to ordinary citizens. Never mind if they're Krishna's devotees. So I could go on and on and on and on here about all the different problems Satsvarupa created for ISKCON, but we just wanted to point, just a general direction here, that he is a major cause of the problems that ISKCON has suffered. And I hope this helps clear things up a little bit. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.